You can all see what Putin is doing every night, massive drone attacks. The Russians are using dozens of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hundreds of drones. In order to protect lives in our cities, we need constant support, air defense. Now we have very important agreements with Germany about air defense. The Germans are constantly supporting us, including with missiles for air defense. I would like to say thanks for that. I would also like to emphasize that this kind of support will make Russian terror meaningless. And also, when we talk about new support of weapons for our army, about more long-range weapons for our soldiers, we are talking about how to reduce Russian offensive actions. We have discussed in detail the diplomatic possibilities, today's situation regarding peace talks. The world has been waiting for more than a week for the Russians to finish their so-called memorandum, what they need to stop the killing of people. Everyone is waiting. So far, they have not come up with anything new and are simply injecting their old ultimatums back into the information space. Ukraine believes that there should be no preconditions for a ceasefire. I would like to have a completely open conversation with our partners regarding Ukraine participating in this NATO summit. I think this is right and honest. In my opinion, if Ukraine is not present at the NATO summit, then this will be Putin's victory, but not over Ukraine, but over NATO. Therefore, the decision is up to the partners.
US President Donald Trump gives Putin another 2 weeks to consider ceasefire proposal. The US instead pressures Ukraine to meet with the Russian delegation again, despite the lack of real progress. Meanwhile, Trump has new problems with the law. So why does Trump hesitate to impose sanctions on Russia, and why does the US force Ukraine to participate in these senseless negotiations with Russia? US President Donald Trump is getting more angry with Putin's actions in Ukraine. Trump considering new sanctions against Russia, according to Wall Street Journal. Trump is annoyed by Russia's attacks on Ukraine and slow progress in negotiations. At the same time, the sanctions will definitely not apply to banking transactions. In this way, the US wants to force Putin to make concessions. However, Trump may not impose new sanctions if he decides so. In addition, Trump is considering the possibility of withdrawing from negotiations. According to Wall Street Journal, there are 3 main reasons why Trump has not yet imposed sanctions against Russia. First, Trump does not like President Zelenskyy. Second, Trump fears that sanctions will harm the restoration of economic ties between Russia and the US. Moreover, Trump always thought that Putin would do him a favor and end the war in Ukraine due to the good personal relations with Trump. At the same time, Putin's unwillingness to make a compromise disappointed Trump, as Russian dictator once again refused a 30-day ceasefire proposal based on the results of a recent phone call. Moreover, Trump said Wednesday that he is very disappointed over Russia's airstrikes on Ukraine. However, Trump still gives Putin another 2 weeks to consider the ceasefire proposal.
Do you believe the Russians are being disrespectful when they say that your criticisms of Putin are simply an emotional response? And do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we're going to find out very soon. We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently, but it'll take about a week and a half, 2 weeks. We have Mr. Witkoff is here, is doing a phenomenal job, is dealing with them very strongly right now. They seem to want to do something, but until the document is signed, I can't tell you. Nobody can. I can say this, that I'm very disappointed at what happened a couple of nights now where people were killed in the middle of what you would call a negotiation. I'm very disappointed by that. Very, very disappointed. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you said yesterday that Putin is playing with fire. What will be the consequences for Russia if Russia continues to
Well, I'm not going to tell you exactly, but the words speak pretty loud. We're not happy about that situation. I think we're doing very well with Iran. I think we're doing very well with Gaza. But we are doing very well with Iran, and I think we're going to see something very sensible, because there are only 2 outcomes. You know what the 2 outcomes is: a smart outcome and there's a violent outcome, and I don't think anybody wants to see the second. But I think we've made a lot of progress, and we'll see. You know, they still have to agree to the final stages of a document, but I think you could be very well surprised what happens there, and it'd be a great thing for them. They could have a great country into the future.
What stopped you from imposing new sanctions on Russia?
Only the fact that if I think I'm close to getting a deal, I don't want to screw it up by doing that. Let me tell you, I'm a lot tougher than the people you're talking about, but you have to know when to use that. If I think it's going to hurt a deal, this isn't my war. This is Biden's war, Zelensky's war, and Putin's war. This isn't Trump's war.
Meanwhile, Ukraine demands that Russia immediately hand over to Kyiv a memorandum with the terms of a ceasefire. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov said that Ukraine convened to the Russian side its position on a ceasefire in the continuation of ceasefire talks. According to him, Russia promised to hand over its memorandum immediately after the prisoner exchange, which ended on Sunday. Quote, "We call on the Russian side to immediately fulfill this promise and stop trying to make the meeting destructive. Diplomacy must be meaningful and the new meeting must have a result." Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha also says that Russia should immediately hand over its memorandum and not wait for the meeting on Monday. As we know, the US pushed Ukraine to conduct another meeting with the Russians in Istanbul this Monday, despite the fact that Russians didn't agree to a ceasefire nor made any kind of compromises. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that Russia has not yet submitted its proposals for a peace agreement to Ukraine and partners. According to Zelenskyy, the Russians have been preparing their proposal for over a week, but have not yet provided them to the US, Turkey, and Ukraine for review. Earlier, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Daniel Tkiie, said that the Russian side is afraid to send Ukraine so-called memorandum on a ceasefire, as this indicates its unrealistic ultimatum.
Today, I held a meeting with Ukraine's Defense Minister Umerov, Foreign Minister Sybiha, and Head of the Presidential Office Yermak regarding our diplomatic efforts. We maintain daily coordination with our partners and are preparing additional meetings for this week. Today, we had conversations with both American and European partners. It's important to speak honestly to everyone in the world, especially those who have supported a ceasefire. Russia is dragging out the war and doing everything it can simply to deceive the countries that are still trying to influence Moscow with words rather than pressure. Words do not work with Moscow. Even the so-called memorandum, which they promised and allegedly spent over a week preparing, no one has seen it yet. It has not been shared with Ukraine. It has not been shared with our partners. They haven't even shared the new agenda with Tkiie, the country that hosted the first meeting, although they promised the exact opposite. And above all, they promised it to the United States, to President Trump. Another Russian deception. They are doing everything to ensure the meetings are meaningless, and that is yet another reason why there should be sufficient sanctions, sufficient pressure on Russia.
At the same time, Vladimir Putin's concession for a ceasefire in Ukraine include a demand that Western leaders pledge in writing to stop enlarging NATO eastwards and lift sanctions on Russia, according to Reuters. The three Russian sources say that Putin wants a written pledge by major Western allies not to enlarge the US-led NATO alliance eastwards and formally rule out Ukraine's and Georgia's and Moldova's membership in NATO. Russia also wants Ukraine to be neutral, some Western sanctions lifted, a resolution of frozen assets, and protection for Russian speakers in Ukraine. The first source says that if Putin realizes that he is unable to reach a peace deal on his own terms, he will seek to show the Ukrainians and Europeans by military power that peace tomorrow will be even more painful. Putin and Russian dictator have repeatedly said any peace deal must address the root causes of the conflict. Ukraine instead said that Russia should not be granted veto power over its aspirations to join NATO. Ukraine says it needs West to give it strong security guarantees to deter any future Russian aggression. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to hold off on the Iran strikes as the US pushes for a new Iranian nuclear deal. Trump said that he told Israeli Prime Minister to hold off on an Iran strike to give the Trump's administration more time to push for a new nuclear deal with Tehran. Quote, "I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we are very close to a solution. However, US officials are worried that Israel could decide to carry out strikes on Iranian nuclear program without much warning, according to the New York Times. US intelligence believes that Israeli government could make the preparation to carry out an attack in as little as 7 hours before, which would leave the American side little time to attempt to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu. The US intelligence officials doubt the efficacy of the unilateral strike by Israel, and Israeli officials are said to believe that the US would have no choice other than to assist if Tehran were to strike back. Israeli officials have told Washington that a strike could be carried out even if a nuclear agreement is reached between the US and Iran, according to the New York Times.
We're doing very well with Iran. I think we're doing very well with Gaza, but we are doing very well with Iran, and I think we're going to see something very sensible, because there are only two outcomes. You know what the two outcomes is: a smart outcome and there's a violent outcome, and I don't think anybody wants to see the second. But I think we've made a lot of progress, and we'll see. You know, they still have to agree to the final stages of a document, but I think you could be very well surprised what happens there, and it'd be a great thing for them. They could have a great country into the future. Yeah.
President, back on Iran, did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Just back on sanctions.
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him? Did you
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now. Because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. So no trust. I want it very strong, where we can go in with inspectors, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
At the same time, Elon Musk is leaving Donald Trump's team, according to the Associated Press. Musk has often come into conflict with other senior officials in Trump's administration who did not like Musk's methods of work. In addition, some members of Trump's team question the results of Musk's work on reducing irrational government spending and reducing bureaucracy. In addition, Musk himself recently criticized Trump's new bill, which provides tax cuts and strengthening immigration laws. Musk indicated that the document only increases the federal deficit and undermines the work of the Department of Government Efficiency. Also, Elon Musk is leaving his government role as a top advisor to Donald Trump. Musk's departure comes one day after he criticized Trump's legislative agenda, saying he was disappointed by what the president called his big, beautiful bill. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has new problems with the law. US Federal Court of International Trade has declared the tariffs imposed by President Trump against almost all countries of the world illegal. A panel of the 3 federal court judges unanimously decided to declare Trump's decrees on imposing duties on imports of goods from a number of countries unconstitutional. The court ruled that Trump had exceeded his authority, as under US Constitution only Congress has the right to impose tariffs. A White House spokesman criticized the decision and said the Trump administration has already filed an appeal. However, a federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. on Thursday temporarily halted the decision, reinstating the levies for now. Its order says that it would grant the Trump administration request for an immediate administrative stay and gave the plaintiffs, 5 US-based companies and a round of 12 states until 5 June to respond to the administration. CBS News reports some trading partners faced higher import duties with the president's decision to raise tariffs against China this month. However, the federal appeals decision on Thursday to reinstate the duties adds more uncertainty over tariffs. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and glory to Ukraine.